If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniak. So, over the last 7 months, I've been working for someone I responded to on Craigslist. I'll just explain everything. I was searching the internet for some sort of paying gig. I didn't really care what. Then, I came across a post on Craigslist. I had refreshed the page and there it was. Someone was looking for a person to come by and feed their pets. I assumed they were out of town or something, so I contacted them and left my number through email. I got a response immediately, in the form of a cell phone call. The caller was a man who explained to me that he was moving out of town and his parents had cats they wanted fed daily. I gave the man my name so he could run me through everything. In about 20 minutes, I'm hired. I went there the next morning to get all the instructions and whatnot, meeting the man that I'd spoken to on the phone. His name's Ben. Ben explained to me that he would no longer be able to care for his parents' cats, and that his parents needed to focus on themselves. So I was being brought on to take care of that. The money would be left on the kitchen table at the end of every week. $200. Just to feed some cats. I know, right? In addition, money for more cat food would be left for me as needed. Then, he told me the first thing that I thought was strange. I was to come at exactly 10 every day and be gone by 10:10 a.m. And I was never, ever, under any circumstances, to interact or speak to his parents when I'm in their home. They will be in their chairs in the living room, watching television, and to never disturb them. He said if any of that would be a problem, to which I assured him it's not. He then showed me the area in which the cats eat and where the food is kept. While not rude in the least, he was very adamant that I do not explore further in the home, which I promised him wouldn't be a problem. He ushers me outside, showed me where the spare keys are, in case the door's ever locked. But he told me that was very unlikely to happen, with that expressing his hope that I could be trusted one last time. I then shake hands with him. He now told me to be there at 10 a.m. every day starting tomorrow. If I'm ever unable to make it, call. Leave a message on their home phone, to which he gave me the number. I shook my head, on my way. The next day comes. I went inside at exactly 10 a.m. I walked into the home, and immediately to my right were Ben's parents, sitting in recliners, facing away from me, watching some kind of game show. I announced my presence, to which they ignore, and made my way to the kitchen. I feed the cats and left. The exact same scenario plays out countless times over the next few months. 10 a.m. Hello, which is unreturned. Feed the cats and leave on Friday. Then I pick up the small stack of 20s from the table. Easy as hell. Then, the inevitable came. One day, I was running late. I got home at 10:08, entering in and apologising to Ben's parents for being late, to which I do not get a response. They just kept sitting in their chairs watching their game show. I went to the kitchen to feed the cats, look at my phone. 10:11. I walked towards the hall, towards the front of the door. When I reached the living room, I then jumped back in shock. Ben's parents are standing there, completely still, staring directly at me. I apologise for running late and get out of there. Though unnerved, I go back the next day on time. Everything's fine. A few more months went by of nothing strange, and then comes the last day I'm there. I get there at 10:03, but wasn't worried because I knew I could be out before 10:10. The problem came when I was in the kitchen and heard someone whisper, "Help me." It startled me. I jumped, looking around for the source of the cry for help. I saw no one, but I heard it again, and then a third time. I began looking around before realizing I was running behind. I look at my phone, it's 10:10. Now my heart sinks as I look down the hallway, seeing Ben's parents for the first time in light. They are grossly pale looking, very malnourished, essentially walking skeletons. I apologized for taking so long and said I'll be on my way, but they just stood there, blocking the way to the front door. I said I'd take the back door, which was located in the kitchen, but when I went to open it, I found it required a key to open from the inside. Now panic sets in. I look behind me, and I can see that his parents are about half a foot away from the entrance of the kitchen. I have nowhere else to go, except for what I assume was a door to a pantry. They had blank stares across their faces. Their eyes looked as though the life had been drained out of them long ago. In a last-ditch effort, I went through the door that I thought was a pantry, and was instead met with a staircase leading to a basement, with of course no light. As soon as I opened the door, there was a horrid stench that washed out the otherwise clean air. I carefully went down the stairs, looking through a window. They're all now shut. I happened to look upstairs. My parents were now standing next to each other at the top. It was truly horrifying. I get my phone up, dial 911, not knowing what else to do. When I explained my situation, they said they'd send out a car immediately and to stay on the phone with them while they connect me to the unit en route. I run into the dark basement using my phone as light. It didn't provide much illumination since I'm in the middle of a call, but it's enough. There were racks of junk that lined the basement, separating into aisles. I went down to check if any of the windows were possibly loose. Then I turned around, shining the light in front of me. I'm now inches away from them. They had this horrible look on their faces, I screamed, running, tripping over something, sending my phone flying. Of course it's face down. I can't find it. I run back up the stairs into the kitchen, looking back and seeing nothing but darkness because I'm in too deep. Seeing their faces now. I ran down the hall to the front door, thinking it's open. I screamed when I saw the cop standing right in front of me. He said if I was the one that called, as I pushed past him to get outside, and told him I was. I look in the window and see the parents sitting in their chairs watching their game show. I explained this time that the crazy old people trapped me in their house and were chasing me. The cop went into the parents and looked around while I sit in the cop car. He came in about 5 minutes later asking, "Are you sure that someone was chasing you?" I said yes, absolutely, that it's the 2 old people that lived there. He informed me that the people that lived there, in the chairs, have been dead for quite some time. I said, "What's the smell then?" He said another body down there in the basement. Backup shows up. I give my statement and explained how I'd been coming there every day for months and months to feed the cats. I told them everything. A few days later, I found out that it was Ben's body in the basement.
A few months ago, some scumbags broke into my apartment while I was at work. They rummaged through all my stuff, tearing apart my room. They took a bunch of stuff, including a bunch of cash I stored away, my Xbox One, a 40-inch flat screen, and a bunch of food from my pantry. I came home that night to find the apartment had been trashed. It looked like a cyclone had moved through my bedroom. Of course I ended up calling the police, who came right over and investigated the apartment. The person had smashed the window in my bedroom and crawled in. I live on the ground floor, so it would have been really easy for them. I gave the police a list of all the stuff that went missing, along with the serial numbers for the electronics. They unfortunately didn't find any sort of fingerprints or anything they could use, and there were no cameras on that side of the building. I called the rental agency for my building about the window, but they told me they couldn't send somebody until the next morning. This was probably the worst weekend of my life. The very thought that someone came into my space and decided they wanted my stuff sickens me. Thieves are the worst kind of people. A couple of months went by, and there was no word on any of the stuff that got stolen. I expected that much. Police in my city are useless most of the time. I had already gotten a new TV, and so all I needed was a new Xbox. I did some thinking, and decided that I wanted to buy a second-hand one, as I didn't want to spend another $400 on a new console. So I jumped on Craigslist and did some searching. Sure enough, I find a seller who wants to sell his for $250, along with all his games and controllers. It was a pretty fantastic deal. The only issue was a guy lived in the next town over. On the other hand, I was getting real tired of not playing video games, and so I gave in. I contacted the guy and inquired about the console. He told me his name was Sam. He seemed like a really cool guy, and he was even willing to hold it for me if I came the same day. I agreed. I jumped into my car 15 minutes later, and drove the 45 minutes to the next town. The town was very rural, and there were a lot of wooded areas. The house I was trying to find was way out there, next to some old train tracks. I pulled up to the house, which was off a dirt road. It was a real piece of junk, run down and overgrown. The old white paint was almost all chipped away, and the guy had a massive pile of trash right in his front yard that was filled with a bunch of old junk, like TV sets and radios. I was unsure if I even had the right house, so I walked up to the door and hesitantly knocked. There was a short wait before I heard someone shuffling on the other side of the door. It opened and revealed a very thin-looking man with a buzz cut. I took notice that his clothes were filthy. He was wearing a tattered flannel shirt and ripped blue jeans. "You Sam?" I asked him. "Yeah, you here for the Xbox?" I nodded nervously with an mm-hmm. He flashed me a smile and invited me inside. I had a bad feeling, like something wasn't right with this guy. His house was a disaster. Almost every piece of furniture was filled with junk and garbage, and it looked like his kitchen hadn't been cleaned in months. I knew right off the bat he was a hoarder. I was worried about being the awkward one, but this guy was about as awkward as one could get. When I think about it now, I feel like he was probably on the spectrum, but I couldn't be too sure. There was also a smell, like something in his house was rotting away, like something dead. He led to into the hallway on the first floor, and stopped at the door that looked much newer than the others in the house. "It's right down there," he said. He pushed the door open to reveal stairs leading to a dimly lit basement. Alarms started going off in my head, and I knew that there was something seriously wrong. I stood at the top of the stairs, peering down. Sam stood behind me, almost as if he wanted to make sure I couldn't escape. "Go on then," I said, stepping out his way. "You first." "You first," he replied. His awkward smile had gone to a cold gaze. When I looked towards the basement, the rotten smell had grown even stronger. When I listened closer, I could hear what sounded like millions of flies buzzing around down there. I turned and quickly pushed past him, sprinting down the hallway. He started to pursue, but then he stopped. I ran out the front door and back onto the dirt road, jumping into my car before speeding down the road as fast as I could go. Before driving off, I caught a glimpse of his smiling face in the front window of the house. I made it home safe, which is where I realised he had sent me a text message. He, with a little winky face. The Craigslist ad disappeared after that, and I've since blocked his number. I thought about calling his town's local police, but after I calmed down, I realised there was probably not much they could do about it anyway. Days later, I started getting weird phone calls, usually hang-ups every time. This persisted for several weeks before I saw Sam's mugshot on the local news. I guess he lured another lucky buyer to his house, and when the buyer refused to go down to the basement, Sam assaulted them with a knife. Luckily, the buyer managed to fight him off and escape. The police were called, and were shocked with what they found upon searching his house. The sick, twisted guy had been killing local dogs and piling them in his basement, where he could do weird experiments on the bodies. The thought of it made me sick to my stomach, knowing what potentially could have happened to me if I hadn't ran. I don't know what happened to Sam, but I'm sure as hell hope he's spending his days in a padded cell somewhere.
If there's one piece of advice I can give anyone, it's never take the cheap way out, no matter how good it seems. Something about that decision will bite you one day. You might be lucky. It may only be a mosquito bite. If not, it can be like a shark bite. For me, I wasn't so lucky, obviously, or I wouldn't be writing this story. Now, a couple of months ago, I got in a very bad accident. My car got totaled almost beyond recognition. My insurance company gave a decent amount for it, but the money was tight for me, and I needed a car fast. I went to every place I could, but ended up on Craigslist. For a day, I kept looking for a deal I couldn't say no to. I needed a decent running car for cheap, but it also had to be reliable. All the sellers at the time were asking fair prices. Too fair for me. I was about to give up for the night when I come across the deal I was looking for. So I found this guy, Robert, was selling a 2001 Toyota Camry with 100,000 miles on it, while claiming it runs smoothly for a good price. I contacted Robert. He told me I could test drive it the next day. I took a taxi out there, gave the car a good drive. Now let me tell you, it ran like it was brand new. No complaints at all. It seemed almost too good to be true. So when I got back, I said, was the car new? And how much was it? No matter how much I pressed, he said there's nothing wrong with it. He seemed genuine about it the whole time. I had the car for about a month without incident. Then one night, I was driving home from a long day's work. It's about 1 in the morning, so you can imagine the roads are desolate. I'm smoking a cigarette with my windows down, listening to the wind fly into the car. I remembered being exhausted. I stopped at a red light and a chill ran down my spine. The light slowly turned green. The sound of the engine mixed with the sound of wind made it almost inaudible. No cars were around, so I slammed on my brakes, bringing my car to a complete stop. I wait a couple of seconds for maybe another whisper or anything, but nothing. No incident occurred the rest of the ride. The next 2 weeks go by without incident. I even forgot about it. Then, something else happened. It's pouring raining while I'm at work, and it's a very slow day, so my boss lets me smoke a cigarette in my car. When I get in my car, I got the same chill once again. Instantly, I remembered my last experience. I sat there in complete silence, waiting for something to happen. About 30 seconds later, my car got filled with the smell of freshly shot fireworks. It got so bad, I began coughing, getting out of my car, then running back inside. Now, the look on my face at the time must have been far from that of a normal one, because my boss came up to make sure everything was okay. I told him about the smell, and the only thing he could think was some of the kids might have messed with my car. We went to check it out this time, and the smell was gone. He said he would check the security cameras later, but never saw a thing. I tried blowing it off again, but this time, I couldn't find a reasonable explanation. After an hour straight of thinking about what happened, I tried to give Robert a call. Unfortunately, he cancelled his phone. A week later, I'd just got into an apartment to deliver a pizza. It's going pretty regular. The guy was cool, giving a nice tip. I had a good conversation with him. I'm about to wrap things up and head out when I notice something in the parking lot that catches my attention. Hey, you drove the Camry here, right? Yeah, why? I think there's something in your car. I now look at my car, and sure enough, I see a girl sitting in there with a shotgun. She had black hair and was very pale. God, she's broke in, call the cops. For a few seconds I thought, knew I weren't crazy. And I finally got a person to see it. Turns out it wasn't the case. When I was on the 3rd floor, the girl was looking forward while I was facing her side. I lost sight of her going down the 2nd floor, but I saw her again for a second, and let me tell you, I nearly fainted. She was staring directly at me from ear to ear, but that wasn't the worst part. Her eyes. There's something else. They were normal looking blue eyes, almost pretty, but with a very black iris, and around it, there's something else wrong too that I cannot put my finger on. The next thing I know, I feel a tap on my shoulder, breaking my trance. It's a pizza delivery guy informing me the cops have been called. He said, why am I standing there? So I explained. We both looked at the car again and she's gone. The police ended up coming. We filed the report. They do a quick search through my car to see if there's any signs of a break-in. Unfortunately, there's none. Everything was where it should have been. It made no sense. The police said they'd check on cameras and inform me if they saw anything, but they still have not spoke to me. Over the next few weeks, I would hear the damn whispering again, but only when my car or something in my environment made a noise. At first, it's occasional, but by the second week, it's there almost every time. I can make out separate voices, a man and a woman. I still don't know what they're saying. That was until I made it home. A few minutes from my home, I got the chill again. It's coming. I knew it. Ever so clear now. Then I hear it. It's your turn now. I felt ice cold breath run down my neck. In my peripheral, I could see her reflection in my rearview mirror, wanting me to turn, waiting. She kept whispering those damn words in my ear, creating a layer of ice upon my neck. The longer she whispered, the more it felt like I was being pulled into her influence. Finally, I get home, ran inside, locked myself in my room, but I'm starting to think it's a mistake. If I were to look out my window, I could see my car, and the whispering, I'm hearing it again. It's 3 voices now. They keep telling me to look at the car just one more time. Really quick, just for a second. Maybe, no, yes. Maybe I should just look real quick. Not for a second. I mean, what harm could it do? Besides, I've seen one. What about the others?
About 3 years ago, I was obsessed with Craigslist. I would go on there to find anything I needed. It seems more like an addiction now. I had just turned 17, and I was the only person in my homeroom class with a license, but no car. Of course, I went to Craigslist to find a car for a reasonable price. I was scrolling through different varieties of cars when I stumbled upon one in my price range. It was a 2008 Ford Explorer, only $3,000, and at the time, I wasn't entirely sure why it was so cheap, but I was naive. I clicked on the picture and read the description. It seemed harmless enough. I wanted to get rid of this car because it's my wife's. She recently died. I only need $3,000 more to give her a funeral she deserved. If you feel uncomfortable, I can bring my daughter with me. Quickly, I looked at his contract information and messaged him. It didn't take long before I had a reply, and a day that we'd meet. I didn't ask for his daughter to come, since it didn't seem like a murderer. We agreed to meet the next day, and he only lived an hour away. The next day rolled quicker than I expected, and I had to hurry up and leave. I took my dad's car and started to drive to his house, where we'd agreed to meet. When I got there, a chubby man in his early 30s greeted me. Our exchanges weren't anything to put me on edge, but he had an unnerving smile. After our exchanges, I called my dad to come and get his car. I got in my new car and drove home. By the time I got back home, I was exhausted. I took a quick shower and fell onto my bed, and dozed off soon after. At about 2 AM, I woke up to the sound of a car door slamming shut. I rubbed the sleep out my eyes and jerked up. I looked out my window and saw a car in my driveway that wasn't mine, or any of my family members. I saw a short, chubby figure getting out of the car, with what looked like an axe. I was almost frozen, but I had the courage to get my phone out and dial 911. I had an 8-year-old sister, so I carried her sleeping body into my room and locked the door. The police wasn't far from my house, so I guess the man heard the sirens. He ran off because the cops never found anyone. I thought that was the end of it, but I was so wrong. Yesterday evening, I was watching the news, and I saw the police had gotten a deadly serial killer in custody. He was responsible for killing 27 people from Craigslist. It was the same man I'd met. I have escaped death. They said his partner in crime, his daughter, had gotten away, and was looking for people to kill on Craigslist that her father hadn't killed.
I needed a new roommate quickly, and eventually settled on this girl from Florida who was moving out to San Diego. She initially came off as a little goofy and naive over the phone, but in person was just strange. She had no sense for personal boundaries, would eat my food, use my laptop when I wasn't home, and would barge into my room when I had friends over and say the weirdest stuff, all in the first week. She did and said a ton of things that was so weird when she lived with me. She started hanging out with a co-worker from Subway, along with her co-worker's boyfriend who just got out of jail, and 4 of his friends. They really only came around because she'd buy stuff, and they laughed at the dumb stuff she'd say and do. She would always leave the window cracked because she lost her keys all the time. Anyway, her friends actually broke into my home, stole my TV, laptop, other TV in my small room, this wedding dress my aunt wanted for me off eBay, a bunch of DVDs, my glasses. Now I called her freaking out, and she's just getting home and called the police on me because I broke her laptop. Crazy. The cops came and pulled me aside, and she seemed unstable and suggested I don't use Craigslist for roommates anymore. I had her backed against the wall and was screaming at her when the cops walked in. I thought screw it when they saw that, but after talking to her for 5 minutes, they understood my frustration. The cops looked down to see what was stolen. Now I eventually got my stuff back, and I had to actually set up cameras this time, which cost so much money. Taking the chance on Craigslist is one of my biggest regrets I have. Once I was selling a couch on Craigslist. I really dropped the price low, but I just couldn't seem to get any attention for it whatsoever. In the end, I dropped it to a ridiculously low price, and finally, I had someone show some interest. Now over the phone, this person seemed weird. Like they would stop mid-sentence, laugh a little, then continue. I thought, yeah, whatever, it's just somebody on drugs or something. And I was praying in the back of my mind that they would be sober when they come round. So we agreed upon a date, and I was surprised when they actually showed up. No, I didn't see any car or anything. It really caught me off guard because I was sitting in the living room when they appeared. As I opened the door, I'm met by a tall, weird-looking person who can't really hold eye contact. I said, "Hey, you here for the couch?" And they smiled and said yes. I recognized that weird laugh immediately. I showed them to the couch and said, "Here it is, you got the money." They went, sat on the couch, let out the most maniacal laugh that I've ever heard in my life, got up, and sprinted back into the forest. That was the last I ever heard of them, and the last time I ever went on Craigslist. The weirdest thing that ever happened to me was when I was browsing Craigslist randomly one day. I was searching for a car, and as I clicked on one, I thought my computer was bugging out. It said an old truck as a description. The location was within 1 kilometer of me, and you know sometimes when you're on another page and you open a new one and the picture from that page transfers over. Well, I was thinking that's what happened, because it's a picture of me. No one wants to buy me, I thought. As I click further, there's a page listing me for sale, full of details about me, pinpointing my exact address, what food I like and everything. I was freaking the hell out and called the cops. The thing was, a month later it happened again. After this I ended up moving away. I just couldn't stomach the fact that something this weird happened to me twice. None of my friends would ever do anything like that to me. I just pray it as someone I knew messing around, nothing more serious. I bought a truck off Craigslist once. Well, I say bought, almost. Everything seemed fine until we did the test drive. Now I'm not kidding you. As we're going along, the brakes failed and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The handbrake wouldn't work either. We ended up having to both jump out of the doors. The truck ended up rolling all the way down the hill and square into a tree.
I was desperate. I had recently been let go from my job as a CNA at the same place after 11 years. Not even a thank you. I was a young woman trying to make ends meet, and I thought I'd struck gold when I first read the post on Craigslist. Caregiver needed for elderly couple, mostly for wife. Duties will include assisting with bathing and dressing. May also include some cooking and cleaning. Experience is preferred, along with a kind heart and worker-bee-like attitude. Good starting pay offered. Other than the obvious spelling mistakes, the ad sounded perfect. I did wonder why they didn't ask for any references, but at that point, I couldn't afford to be picky. My other efforts at finding work hadn't panned out at all. Within less than 24 hours after I applied, I received a response back asking me to come out and meet them the next day. I checked my calendar and I was free. The town was basically one made road, running straight through the centre of town. There were a few homes on each side. A lot of them were multi-level homes, with some having yards that looked neglected and needed a sprucing up. I pulled up to the house with my GPS blaring, "You have arrived at your destination." I got out of my car and took a moment to look around a bit more. As I was scanning, my eyes met those of an elderly man sitting in a chair on his front porch. I smiled and waved, but instead of returning the gesture, he stared back at me with a blank expression. He had that 1,000-yard stare going, and it made me shiver a bit, despite it being quite warm outside. I didn't see anyone else out, and heard no sounds except an occasional bird chirping somewhere unseen. There was an eerie calmness about the whole area. Answering the front door after several knocks was an elderly man. He introduced himself as Douglas. He welcomed me inside and asked me to take a seat in his living room. I sat down in an open chair, with Douglas saying he'd be right back as he walked upstairs. I heard Douglas lose his footing a couple of times, and I'd hear a thud on the wooden stairs every few steps. I got up and walked over to the bottom of the stairs. "Hey, are you okay, sir?" By the time I got over, I saw him disappear around the corner upstairs. He never did answer me. I retook my seat in the living room and looked around the place. The TV had some old game show on that I didn't recognise. I have to be honest, the whole place looked a bit unkempt and dusty. And then there was a smell. It was something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Kind of musty, like they hadn't opened the house up in a while. I sat and waited for a while. The whole time I thought I heard talking from upstairs, even with the TV on. I'm guessing Douglas was talking to his wife. I wanted to get this going though. Lord knows I needed this job. Finally, after a while, Douglas came back down. This time accompanied by his wife. "Hello, my dear. My name's Martha. How do you do?" Her start threw me off a little bit. I extended my hand to shake hers, but all she did was give me that familiar stare like the man outside earlier did. She turned to her husband and he simply nodded at her. She awkwardly extended her hand and we shook. I swear I could feel something tingling beneath the skin on her palm. Another shiver came over me. The three of us sat and talked for a bit, and I got mostly yes and no answers to my questions. Before I could ask about their lack of wanting any references, I had nature calling me to find the bathroom. Martha directed me to one through the kitchen and down another hallway. Her instructions weren't too helpful, but I eventually found it. The musty smell assaulted my nostrils as soon as I opened the door. "Good God," I said. I tried to cover my nose and my mouth as best I could. I thought about cracking the window, but decided to get done and out of there. When I opened the toilet, I was nearly hurled as another wave of stench hit me. What's worse was what was inside. Bugs everywhere. Some looked dead, but most were squirming around in the water of the bowl. Many climbed over each other to get out, as they fell out and came right at my feet. I stepped on a few, and they crushed like dry leaves under my shoes. "Jesus," I said. I pulled the door open so hard it slammed into the wall as I let go. I ran into the hallway, ready to 1. Apologise for slamming their door, and 2. Let them know about their obvious bug problem. But I only made it the first few feet when I stopped dead in my tracks. At the end of the long hallway was Martha. She was standing there, completely still. The lighting in the hallway wasn't too good, so I could barely see her face, much less anything else. "You okay, my dear? We heard you scream. Everything alright?" "Oh yeah, you guys have a lot of bugs in here, maybe cockroaches, I couldn't tell. And I'm really sorry about the door." "Don't worry about the door, my dear. Happens all the time. Come in the kitchen, we'll have some tea." I really didn't like tea, but I figured I need to try and make up some ground with them after what just happened. Martha went into the kitchen and I soon followed. She reached into the cabinets and was pulling out seemingly everything inside. "Can I help you with something?" It was then I stopped talking and took a closer look at my surroundings. On top of the cabinets, on top of the refrigerator, even on Martha's clothes, were more bugs. Possibly hundreds of them, all their little antennas slowly waving around. And many of them seemed to be looking right at me with large dark compound eyes. "Martha." I started stepping out of the kitchen, back towards the living room, back towards the front door. "Yes, dear." She was still fumbling around when she finally pulled out the little tea kettle. "Found it." I took a quick peek behind me and Douglas was nowhere to be seen. I turned around to see Martha standing close to me as our noses almost touched. "Ah!" I fell and landed hard on my back. Martha stood over me as she had handfuls of the creatures crawling all over her clothes and skin. Some fell off onto me and I tried to fling them off. "Where are you going, my dear? Do you not want some tea?" As she spoke, a couple of the things fell out her mouth, and I even saw a tooth come out as well. I sprang to my feet and turned towards the door, and smacked right into the thick frame of Douglas. I fell back again, but not all the way this time. I grabbed a chair for support, and half kneeled as 2 bodies of Douglas and Martha slowly advanced on me. It was at this point that something came over me, and I made a split-second decision, one that I would soon come to regret. I got to my feet and sprinted right past both of them. I went between them as they tried to grab me, and ended up falling into each other. I made it to the front door and reached for the handle. It took me a couple of seconds to realise there was no handle. I tried to find another way to get the door open, but nothing would work. I frantically looked around for some other way out. There was no way I was getting into the kitchen or hallway again. I had only one choice, the upstairs. I took the steps 2 at a time, almost slipping in the process twice. The upstairs was no better than downstairs. It was dark and musty. The smell was putrid. I covered my mouth and nose with one hand, while I tried to open every door I came to. None of them opened, but I swear each time I tried the handle, I could hear muffled voices behind the doors. They sounded like they was crying out for help. Finally, the last door I came to swung open without effort. The door was small and set up with only a single bed and mattress along it with a nightstand. The bed was currently unoccupied, and the windows. Both windows had bars crudely placed over them. I caught my breath when I was shoved hard from behind. "This one's for you." I turned my head to see Douglas standing over me. I swear he had the look of satisfaction on his face. Martha followed behind him. They always run. So predictable. She looked down at me and then Douglas, before turning back to head down the hallway. "I'll get you that tea, since you'll be staying up with us now." She laughed in a strange way that sounded forced, like it was foreign to her. I turned back to Douglas, who had now couched down beside me. "Well, let's get comfortable in bed. Our brothers and sisters are waiting." He pointed with both index fingers to the empty room. That's when I heard the sounds of a million nails scratching on the inside of the walls. scratching to get out and get me. He dragged me over to the bed, even as I tried to resist. I had lost the will to fight as soon as I'd entered this room. This had been their plan the whole time, and I walked right into it. God only knows how many others they trapped in there. Douglas threw me onto the bed hard, and we struggled against one another. He held my arms tight and sat on my pelvis to hold me down. "Now, darling, it will only hurt for a moment." He leant right over me and opened his mouth wide, and then I heard his jaw pop out of place. I could hear a loud hissing noise from down his throat. Then I saw them making their way up and out his mouth. Two thick, hairy long antennae. They moved about as widely as the head of some godforsaken monster as it pushed its way up through his throat. As this was happening, I could feel his hold on me lessening up a bit. I searched all around me for anything. To my left, sitting on the nightstand, was a lamp. It wasn't plugged in, so with everything I had, I pushed Douglas off me and onto the floor. At that moment, I heard this thing that started to emerge. I saw two huge, dark compound eyes look at me before I took the lamp and smashed it. I don't know, maybe a dozen times, until it stopped squealing, and it was nothing more than a bloody pulp on the floor. I was angry now. I wanted payback. Still holding the lamp, I took off into the hallway and crept down the stairs until I reached the bottom. I heard Martha still in the kitchen, fumbling around. I made my way towards her, stopping just before the open doorway. Martha was trying to hum some tune, albeit off-beat, and she had her back to me. I ran in, gripping the lamp in both hands. "Here's your goddamn tea." I smacked her on the head, and she fell down into the cabinets hard. Her whole body started to convulse as I dropped the lamp and ran into the hallway. The one I said I'd never go back down again. I remembered now the bathroom had a window. I opened the bathroom door and saw my chance at escaping this place. And, much to my surprise, there wasn't a bug in sight. I forced the window open and pushed the screen. I climbed out and ran through the tall grass and weeds right to my car. That's when I saw them. People standing in front of their homes. Most of them elderly, some young, but they were all standing looking right at me. Then they all opened their mouths and started emitting a collective hissing noise. It was so loud and awful I had to cover my ears as I got into my car. I floored it in reverse with all these people still standing and now pointing at me. As I drove away, I looked and saw the man I had waved at earlier when I arrived in town. He was waving back this time and had the fakest looking smile I'd ever seen. His waving arm fell off his shoulder as he looked down at it. I turned away in disgust and never looked back. When I was sure I was safe and far enough away, I stopped and called the police from a gas station I found. It was a neighbouring police department and they said they'd go look at it right away. When they questioned me 2 days later back at my apartment, they told me the whole town had been abandoned. There was no trace of anyone. Homes left empty, some still with TVs on. I asked about any people trapped in the house I was at. The officer just shook his head silently. It took a while, but I did find another job at an assisted living facility. This one I applied for in person though, and I'm happy to say it's a great place. A bit of a drive, but it's worth it. No bugs as far as I can tell. I just want to leave you this warning though. Those things, whatever they were, are still out there somewhere. I don't know what they are or where they came from, and I think I made a mistake by killing what was inside of Douglas. At night I can hear the sounds of scratching in my walls. It's my turn for payback. So watch out for news of strange disappearances in your area. And if you ever see a posting like the one I did on Craigslist or anywhere else, take my advice, avoid them at all costs. I have to go now, the scratching's getting louder.